thank you everyone for coming today. I appreciate it. Obviously after everything with COVID and so on, we're really pleased to get back to in-person events. So really appreciate everyone coming tonight. Tonight's conversation is all around technology for good. We've got a great speaker lineup. I'll let the speakers do their own introductions. But from us, as obviously London tech leaders, I'll get started. Obviously, I'll address the elephant in the room. I was one of the guys who thought it might be a good idea to have a rooftop event in August. So yeah, the good old British summer has still managed to amaze us. So London Tech Leaders, for anyone who's not been to an event before or one of our online events, we're a peer-to-peer knowledge sharing platform. We've got a website, obviously our events, the content, but what we kind of aim to be is, I suppose, a driving force for innovation, like people collaborating, and obviously a community for kind of senior technology leaders. So these are the organisers on screen now. Myself, Chris, who's going to give a wave, David Crawford at the back, who's going to be comparing the event. So if you've got any feedback or would like to get involved with the event in any way, please reach out to one of us at the end of the event. We're a social bunch, so we're on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, so please do give us a follow. I know there's been a lot of QR codes over the last 2 years, but there's the QR codes if anyone wants to just get a quick link to our social feeds. London Tech Leaders, we've got a great newsletter that goes around monthly. This kind of includes thought leadership articles, video content, obviously mental health tips from our good friends at Sanctus, notifications on our upcoming events, that sort of thing. So if interested, please do sign up. We'll hopefully always keep you entertained. If you want to get involved in the event, there's loads of ways you can do so. So LTL Bites, which is something we're launching this year. It's going to be kind of short, bite-sized videos around kind of specific topics where obviously you feel the community might value from a specific area that you're working on. You can make a short video around that. Speak at an event like this. The LTL show, which is an animated podcast that happens quarterly, but also you can be a contributing author for our articles as well. So there's loads of ways to get involved. If interested, please reach out to one of the organisers. I'm going to pass over to Chris now, who's going to run you through our sponsors. I hope you enjoy the event. Thanks for coming.
Cheers, Jack. So I'm not going to sit up and pitch because I'm one of the sales directors for WeShape, but also the organiser of London Tech Leaders. But essentially, the sponsors who kind of bring this community together are WeShape. So we're a technology consultancy which specialises in DevOps, software engineering, and cloud-native solutions. That's anywhere from technical, organisational advisory, project implementation, whether that be by project squads or on-demand consultants, right through to kind of coaching solutions. We're also behind the London DevOps community. So Jack, who was just speaking, is one of the co-organisers of the London DevOps Network. So if you are interested in kind of speaking at one of those events or getting your teams involved, please do reach out to us as well. Unfortunately enough, in the last month, we've been acknowledged by Slack. So we launched this community about 1.5 years ago, and it's kind of been brought together by you guys consistently turning up to our events, which we really appreciate, contributing to our kind of platform. And Slack wants to kind of be a part of the community and really kind of elevate our brand. So I'm assuming most of you people in the room kind of know what Slack is, but if you don't, it's a business communications tool. Do check it out. And yeah, they've been a big contributor to tonight's event. So just want to say thank you to those guys. And now I'm going to pass over to Alex Stephanie, who is going to talk about the kind of Beam London Tech Leaders partnership and more about kind of what the Beam platform do.
Thank you so much for having me. My name is Alex Stephanie. I'm the founder and CEO of Beam. Anyone recognise this place? Let's have a look if I can bring. Anyone recognise that building there?
Where's the vantage point in Archway?
Correct. Correct. There's not many presentations you've been to that start with Archway. It's not a famous destination in storytelling. It's not New York City. It's not LA. It's not high-rise in Tokyo. But it's where my little story starts, which is Archway Tube Station in North London. And about 3.5 years ago now, I became friends with a homeless man who would sit every day outside this tube station. There's some steps just there, and he would sit every day on these steps. And I'd walk past him, and I have to admit, I ignored him countless times. But then one day, I just stop and I say hello. He's an Irish man in his late 40s. He'd been out of work as long as he could remember. And over the coming months, we became friends. I would go get him cups of coffee. When it was getting cold, I brought him pairs of socks. Tiny little gestures. Then he disappeared. For about 6-7 weeks, he was just nowhere to be seen. And then suddenly he reappears, except that he looks totally different. His big, bushy beard has been shaved off, and frankly, he looks terrible. He looks maybe 10 or 15 years older. And I go up to him and I say, "Where have you been? What's happened?" And he says, "Been in hospital, had a heart attack." And so we talk, and I walk home, and I'm just so frustrated that nothing I've done to help this guy has really helped him. In fact, he's in a much worse position than when we first met. So I asked myself, what could I have done? What should I have done to have made a difference to this guy's life? And clearly the answer was not another cup of coffee, not a pair of socks. It was giving him the skills, the confidence, the support to get back into work so he could provide for himself. And I thought, well, that's going to cost more than a coffee, but what if we all chip in? What if we could crowdfund the skills, the training, everything else that people need and support them all the way from homelessness into a place of financial independence? So that was the initial idea. Then I spent about 6 months talking to homeless people on the streets, in homeless hostels, in refuges, talking to charity CEOs and caseworkers. And one of them says to me, "You should meet Tony." I go, "Great, who's Tony?" He goes, "Oh, Tony. Tony lives in a homeless hostel and he wants to become an electrician." So I say, "Okay, fine, great." And off I go down to South London, and I find myself in a homeless hostel, sat across a table from a man called Tony. Now, Tony had been out of work 21 years. He'd spent a lot of his life as a drug addict, as an alcoholic. He'd been in prison for years, and he was estranged from most of his family. And I sat there and I said, "Hi, Tony, my name's Alex. I'm starting a new thing called Beam, and we're going to help people like you to get into work, and maybe we can help you become an electrician." And he just sits there blankly, totally unimpressed by my pitch. Probably more unimpressed by my pitch than any investor I've ever met, which is quite something. And eventually he pipes up and says, "I don't understand." I say, "What don't you understand?" He goes, I don't understand. Why would anyone help me?" And I say, "I don't know that they will, to be totally honest, but I think people want to help. I think people want to help. And I think if we make it easy for other people to help, I think we're going to see that." So off we go to an electrician training center, and we meet this guy who will teach him to become an electrician. And then I realize I need to raise the money. So I pick up the phone and I speak to some journalists. And it turns out people are pretty interested in Tony's story. This is the first piece of coverage that we get in Time Out magazine. But then Tony's picked up by Sky News. He's on the BBC News, I think 3 times. He's covered in The Guardian, The Independent, Reuters, actually covered all over the world. And we raised the money that Tony needs to become an electrician. It was about £3,500. Off Tony goes. He gets his qualification. He gets a job working on commercial building sites in London. He gets promoted, moves into his own home, is reunited with his family, and his life, in a relatively short space of time, is just immeasurably better. And that was a few years ago. And what we've been building since then at Beam is a scalable model to help ultimately thousands and perhaps millions of people like Tony to do more with their lives and to fulfill their potential. And we've just begun that. Here are where we've got to so far. So far, 362 people like Tony we've supported into jobs and homes. This is a page on our website, which is beam.org. And here you can see all of those 362 people. Sometimes, if there's a particular risk issue, often because someone's been a victim of domestic abuse, they'll use an avatar rather than a photo. But here you can see Jerome become an electrician, Roy an admin assistant, Gaz a railway engineer. Some people have used us to get into housing, become carers, bus drivers, crane riggers, support workers, healthcare assistants, and so many other amazing roles that we need in our society. And how have we done this? Well, building an operational model, building technology is one thing, but it's also been via collaboration. So we work with scale-up tech companies like Olio, and you'll all be hearing about that amazing company in a moment if you don't know it already. And we also work with big listed companies and multinationals like NHS, Bupa, Royal Mail, Cardone, and many others. And what we're doing for those businesses is making it seamless and easy for them to do more on diversity. I think everyone in this room wants to do more. Sometimes it's tough to do what we want to do. And Beam, I think, is stepping into this gap and making it really easy to hire people from disadvantaged backgrounds and to do more on DE&I. This happened today. This was quite fun. We got voted one of the top 10 startups in London. So this is Wired magazine this morning. I don't have a whole bunch of clothes, as you can see. So that's me there. My team very much enjoyed that photo and took the piss quite liberally, I think it's fair to say. One of the things that's really different about us compared to other organizations is our transparency. You can see before that actually all of these are individual profiles, and I could click on any individual profile and learn more about the person. There's a story section. There are the supporters. Here are the people donating to that person's campaign, 76 for this individual. There's a budget which shows all of the things this person needed to get out of homelessness and into work. And then they provide updates as well. So this is a super transparent platform. We also provide a whole load more transparency. There's about 150 live data points. I know, the majority of people in the room work in engineering. So engineering is also a massively important function at Beam. And this is all coming live off our databases. Then we go a little further and we actually give people transparency on an individual level. So if you are a corporate donating through the platform, or you are an individual donating through the platform and you want to see what actually has my impact been, then we show people that. And I can see that 148 people I've backed have started work, and so on. A couple more quick stories, and then I will shuffle off the stage and let some brilliant people join the panel. First, a few quick stories. So one of the first people we worked with, I remember, is Davina. And she said she wanted to be an accountant. And at the time, it struck me that the vast majority of people, maybe 99% of people, would say that's crazy, that someone who's been homeless could become an accountant. And I'm really pleased and proud that we're kind of calling time on stereotypes and nonsense and defeatism like that. And then finally, I want to talk about this guy called Stephen. I told you about the first homeless hostel I went to. There I met Tony. In the second homeless hostel, I meet this guy. He's called Stephen. And I explain how Beam will work, and he says to me, this sounds great, but there's one problem. I say, what? He goes, well, I'm smoking a lot of weed, and I've been doing that every day for ages, and I'm just not ready for this. And I say, you're right. You're not. But if you can get clean, you seem like an amazing guy and would love to work with you. So I walk out that hostel. I don't expect to see this guy or hear from him ever again. 6 months later, he gets back in touch. He's been clean for 3 months. He joins Beam, and he becomes a digger operator. And this is him there in his JCB, rocking it. So for me, I take from that story that actually all people really need is hope. All people really need is belief in themselves and hope that there is a better day ahead. And as a society, I think we've struggled at times to give everyone in our community the hope that should, I think, be a fundamental human right. We're trying to do a little bit to address that at Beam. Thank you so much for listening. I also want to mention that we are doing a bit of a collaboration with each and every one of you in this room. There are different ways to donate to Beam. You can go to beam.org and make a donation, or you can make a monthly donation, and each month you get allocated a new person, you read their story, you see the impact that you're having and share the journey. There's another way, which is you can make a donation on behalf of someone else. And that's what's happened this evening. There is a donation voucher. There is a donation voucher in the going home bag, I think. Fantastic. I haven't screwed this up too much. And each of you has a, I believe, £10 donation. It's a code that you enter on the website, which is beam.org/redeem. You can all give us lots of great advice on our engineering and UX, I'm sure, after having done that. And thank you so much to our hosts and the sponsors for making that possible. So just look in your goodie bag, don't throw it away. A £10 donation has been made on your behalf. Go to beam.org/redeem and redeem it and help change someone's life. Thank you so much.
So that was thought-provoking. Thanks, Alex. I think that was really, really good to hear that. As we said earlier on, our theme for the evening is tech for good. I think probably there's a broad definition of good. I think each of us have some stuff that we're trying to do in our companies. The idea from this evening is that we're going to talk to our panelists, some of whom have profitable businesses, some of whom are social enterprise based, and we're going to see how, try and understand how technology has helped them or perhaps even hampered them in the mission that they're taking their company on. I know that we're all technologists in this room and looking at how technology can help our companies. So it'll be interesting for us to hear that. I guess also the other factor is that we might get a little bit of inspiration about how we can take some of those thoughts and feelings back to our companies to see whether there are missions that we could do using our existing capabilities and technology for good as well. So for those who don't know me, we'll do a quick round of introductions. I'm David Crawford. I'm the Group CTO of Naked Wine. So the idea is that I'm a technologist myself, so I should be able to compare the session and steer us in the right direction. That doesn't always work, so bear with me. I've been doing this, I think we did one 18 months ago, face-to-face at the Telegraph. Some of you may have joined us there. Then we went into lockdown, and so we've been doing this virtually. I was talking to a member of the audience earlier on and saying the thing about doing it virtually is that you can submit your questions as we go along, and then I can happily ignore them if I think they're too hard to answer. Not really going to be able to do that with you in the room tonight. So be kind. But if as we go through the questions that we're going to talk to the panel about, topics we're going to talk to the panel about, you feel strongly like you'd like to ask, or dare I say challenge, what the panelists are saying, please stick your hand up. We'll try and work you. We've only got the one mic, so we might need you to speak up a little bit. But yeah, get involved, and if not, we'll ask for some questions at the end as well. Cool. I'm going to hand over, first of all, to Chris.
Thank you. Isn't this a weird experience, by the way?
Yeah,
just sort of being
definitely.
face to face. I'm sort of arriving today feeling quite normal anxiousness, sharing the panel with some phenomenal speakers, but also a new parent, third child, all under the ages of 5. This is a sort of welcome rest for me as well. So I'm looking forward to not too many questions. I want to get away. Anyway, less about that. So Chris Slater, I'm the CEO of Sanctus. We're a mental health business. We're on a mission we believe everyone should have access to quality mental health support. What do? We do that through working with employers. So we put a coach in a organisation like KFC, BBC, many others, and we provide safe, confidential spaces for employees to work on their mental health. I can talk a little bit more about that later on, but that's me.
Perfect. Thanks, Chris.
Hi everyone, I'm Tessa, co-founder and CEO of Olio. So the Olio story started 6 years ago. I was moving country, and on moving day the removal men told me I had to throw away all of our uneaten food. Now I'm a farmer's daughter, I have a pathological hatred for food waste, and so I was not prepared to do that. So much to the irritation of removal men, I set out into the streets trying to find someone to give my food to. I failed miserably. Was not to be defeated though. I went back to the apartment, and when the removal men weren't looking, I smuggled the non-perishable food into the bottom of my packing boxes. Now, I'd been working in the digital world for about 10 years at that point in time, and I knew there was an app for absolutely everything. And I couldn't believe there wasn't an app where I could just give my food away to a neighbour. And now there is. So it's called Olio, and it basically connects people with their neighbours so you can give away rather than throw away your spare food and other household items. We started as a proof of concept via WhatsApp sort of 5.5 years ago, and today we now have a community of 5 million people who have collectively saved 25 million portions of food from the bin, and we've also shared 3 million non-food items as well. But what I'm most proud about is the environmental impact of that. So that's had an environmental impact equivalent to taking 75 million car miles off the road, and we've also saved 4 billion litres of water.
Wow, some good stats there.
Well, I'm Elliot Code, co-founder and CEO of Ecology, and I previously was a CTO, so I feel like I'm a kindred gang. Thanks for having us here. So Ecology is a social enterprise to help your business go through a sustainable transformation. Our angle is we're just doing this for the planet, and it's interesting what good can happen when you're solely doing it for that reason alone. We traditionally, 2 years ago, offered just a subscription service for businesses just to get their rung on the ladder. It's called a climate positive workforce. Got 10,000 businesses on this now, which is really awesome, but more and more businesses are just finding out that because we're doing this for the right reasons, we have, this proper radical transparency stuff where there's this Google sheet where everything is up in the open, like our financials, supplier receipt trail, and board meeting minutes, and everything that we know, And with this kind of big open transparency thing, that we're finding more and more enterprises especially are just buying into the sort of climate action that we get, that we fund. And so just 1 year ago, our community and businesses had funded 2 million trees, and now we do 2 million trees like every other week. It's freaking awesome. So it's really cool, and we're about to announce in a few months' time that our impact is stacking up to be like 4 or 5% of the UK's carbon emissions. So it's really amazing. Our whole shtick is the world there's a lot of pocket change that we could round up, as in like whether you're an individual or a family person or like a very large enterprise. That pocket change, if we funneled it in the climate solutions that we need, that we can add a couple of decades to our carbon budget, which we could sorely do with. Lovely stuff.
It's that guy again. So, as you've just heard, Beam is the world's first crowdfunding platform for homeless people. And we support mostly people in homeless hostels and women's refuges to get into stable jobs and stable homes. What else can I tell you? I would just say we're very early stage. We're a team of only 32 people, and it's sort of chapter one for us. Super keen to collaborate with and hear from as many of you as possible. So if you do have any questions, just drop me an email. I'm alex@beam.org.
Great. Hold on to the mic for a second, Alex, if you will. Rather than passing it back and forth, I'm just going to speak loudly. Can you hear me at the back all right? Yeah. Excellent. So we're going to go to the first question. I'm going to go to you, Alex, because you've got the mic. So it's a pretty broad question. It's like, okay, we're just coming out of a pandemic. It's great to be here, but let's just talk about that for a second. How did your business mission survive during the pandemic? And did technology help with that? I mean, if you answer, yes, we did a lot of Zoom calls, that's cheating. But how else did you survive during the pandemic, and what was technology's role in that, if it was?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think there's a couple of things. So the first is that when it hit, like everyone else, I think, we sort of went through this phase of thinking, well, what does it do? What does it mean for our customers? And we work with lots of different stakeholders. We work with employers, we work with government, we work with charities, we work with landlords. But first and foremost, we work with our beneficiaries who need the service. On average, they've been out of work 5.5 years. They start jobs with us almost 80% of the time, and we really wanted to make sure that we could continue to deliver an amazing service for them. And of course, people's immediate needs changed very, very rapidly. For a start, people could no longer go and become a plumber because the plumbing training centres were shut. So the first thing we realised is that actually we needed to meet people's immediate and urgent needs. So we kind of repurposed our technology, and we used our crowdfunding platform to fund and deliver emergency items for people. So that was what we did in the immediate couple of months when it in the first lockdown, and we were delivering hundreds of care packages containing sanitary items and food and tablets so children could continue their education and dozens of other things to families, predominantly in London. So that was the first thing we did. The second thing was we realized that actually there are loads of roles. They were just different roles. And so we started working with employers that became an ever more crucial part of this new infrastructure. So it was healthcare assistants in the NHS, it was delivery drivers for Amazon, it was different types of roles that were suddenly urgently needed to keep all of us generally lucky people going. And then the third thing we did was to really sort of invest more in our technology. So if you had come into Beam's office before the pandemic, it would have looked a little bit like a GP surgery. You would have seen lots of kids, lots of mums sitting patiently on chairs waiting for their appointment at Beam. The experience today is completely different. It's an experience that is delivered totally through people's smartphones. And we make sure that if someone doesn't have a smartphone, then we get a smartphone for them. And for us, that's a really, really exciting development because it means we can deliver social care employment services to people way, way cheaper than previously. It's also way more accessible for people. And it's also teaching them new digital skills as well that they need for their job, whatever that may be. So, yeah, quite a huge impact. But yeah, I think all in all, I guess I'm really proud of the team in sort of how they dealt with a very difficult time.
I mean, it sounds like there was opportunity in the changing environment during the pandemic that led to you going, oh, we need to just go in this direction for jobs. And it's great to hear that the technology just solved that kind of problem of engagement with people, but also made it safe during the pandemic, I guess, as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, cool, great. Okay, Tess, what about you?
So when the pandemic hit, it was deeply unclear whether a neighbour-to-neighbour food sharing app could continue to exist. So it was a pretty fraught time. Sasha and I, my co-founder, we were determined that Olio was going to exist, and most importantly, we spoke to our community, and they told us that we had a responsibility to keep operating. So we very quickly spoke to our food safety lawyer, environmental health officer, and implemented sort of within 24 hours, really, a sort of no-contact pickup model, which and sort of put communications throughout the product, governing how people should kind of use Olio to be safe and compliant. And then we had about a kind of 20% drop of activity for the first 2 weeks, and then from kind of mid-April onwards, we have experienced hockey stick growth. So we grew 5x through last year, and that was because, well, many reasons, but so to answer your question about kind of the role of technology, people realised that actually they were living very, very isolated lives, and in a time of a pandemic, it's very instinctive actually to want to reach out and connect with your local community to help people or to receive help. And Olio is a really kind of safe and easy and inclusive way for people to be able to connect with their local community. So we saw rapid growth in the business, and then we also were able to, when the schools closed, my kids said to me in the kitchen that morning when I told them there's no school from tomorrow, as part of that conversation they said to me, what's going to happen with the kids that rely upon free school meals, because that's something we've kind of discussed as a family. And I kind of felt this sort of gut punch, and I thought, shit, what is going to happen to those kids? Figured out there's like 1.3 million children who, as of Monday, were not going to necessarily have access to food. And I thought, we've got to do something. We have actually got a platform here. So why don't we galvanise our community and get them cooking for kids? And so within 26 hours, we rolled out a campaign, enlisted the support of 20 celebrity chefs, and got our community cooking and preparing packed lunches for kids. And so I think that for me demonstrates technology alone can't do anything, actually, really, but technology combined with people can be transformational.
I think you're preaching to the converted in this room. We know technology is just an enabler. But it's really great to hear that it was able to help you quickly solve a challenge that just kind of came on us all overnight, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. All right, Chris, what about you? And I'm guessing you're going to have to use the word Zoom in here somewhere. But how did you find that I mean, you started this role during the pandemic, right? So how did that go?
I did. So I joined the business in November. So I sort of come in as a CEO into a mental health business. in the middle of a pandemic where you're not meeting anybody face to face. It's been an interesting experience. But yeah, I mean, it's probably worth talking. I mean, we've all seen the stats, we've all experienced the last 18 months, but I genuinely feel like we're at the cusp of a tsunami of mental health issues that are going to start cascading through. All the stats are out there in terms of 60% of your teams will be feeling different and worse from their mental health perspective than they were 18 months ago. So I think we're at the cusp of some dangerous situations that are going to start arising. And yeah, we recently commissioned a piece of work, 300 HR professionals, our 40 coaches, to sort of listen to like what are the issues that are coming up, and combination of anxiety as we sort of return, burnout. The stats around us working 10 hours versus 8.5 hours a day. We're all experiencing that. And then the uncertainty, this paradox of choice. Should I come down here today? Do I shake somebody's hand while I'm in the room? All those feelings that we've all experienced probably here this evening as well. So, for me, I think like the role of businesses and the role now of you as leaders to be supporting employees coming out of this pandemic. We pivoted virtually, so we were in person, and we moved to a virtual model, but we'll be returning back to in person. Because I think to your question around technology, I think technology has had a damaging effect across us all. I think if I speak for myself, how many times over the last 18 months I've lived inside my head rather than leading with my heart. So because I'm not having that engagement, we've had thousands, millions of years of evolution where we're sort of meeting face to face and learn how to react, to respond, to be human with each other, and suddenly we're doing it through a screen, and I think that worries me. That worries me in terms of the rhetoric that's going around the benefits of remote, but I don't think we're really living with what it means to be human. So for me, we're a human-first organisation supported by tech. You'll see loads of organisations in the mental health space going, I've got an app, talk to somebody, ask me a few questions. I think it's bullshit. I think it's, the transformational work is about one-to-one, human-to-human work. So that's what we're here for, that's what we're standing for. So you as leaders, you need to be thinking, if it's not on your table today, how are you supporting your employees?
Great. Well, there you go. There's a bit of a different point of view where tech's not necessarily the right answer, right? Do you want to pass back to Elliot? So what are your thoughts on this, Elliot? How's technology in the pandemic helped you or not?
Yeah, it's interesting. We're 2 years since our launch, so most of that is pandemic-y. But before that, when there's like a heat wave, and then we saw that this massive influx of new customers for us, or subscribers and members, and then Extinction Rebellion would be on the streets and like massive thing, and Greta would do her thing, and big influx, and it's really interesting. I think we were kind of in a unique position to actually see the impact those sorts of headline generating things actually happen. They're massive catalysts for change, but those went away, and it was a different set of issues. Relying on kind of other paid media channels and all sorts. It was really interesting, and trying to raise money and like investment in the midst of like the world falling apart. It's just don't want to do that again. Yeah, it was absolutely terrible. But what happened during that time is allow integrations to happen, because the internet was booming, and we released this kind of Shopify plugin, for example. There's like 1 million e-commerce stores that are powered by something called Shopify, and for every product sold, you could plant 10 trees or whatever. So we went through to the integrations route because we did this we realized that these amazing trees that we're planting in Madagascar that are protected for the next 30 years only really cost like 12p. Maybe other people and businesses in the world want to integrate into any business that they can think of. Like, how do they get climate action into the things that they're doing? And so now we've got this thing on the Shopify store, for example, and it just grows. So now we have like tens of thousands of trees planted every day just through this thing. So it was a good thing to kind of force us to kind of get involved with.
Yeah, that sounds great. I want to hand the mic back for a second. Okay, so thanks for that. Anybody else sitting there thinking, God, I'm just not doing enough? I'm sitting here, I'm thinking about the good things that my company does, thinking about the things I do in my family life, my personal life. I'm an okay kind of guy. But Jesus, it's tough sitting next to these guys. Okay, we dealt with the pandemic. It's over. If you're still suffering from it, just shake it off a little bit, right? We're not doing pandemic anymore. We're in a new, brave new world, right? Okay, so let's move on to, given all of your chosen missions for your companies, right? A lot of you will have, Tessa, you said, you've got a partner, you are very like-minded, slightly different experiences. Elliot, I think you mentioned that your wife is your co-founder, so you probably got people who joined you on this journey who are really enthusiastic, right? And that's absolutely great, yeah? But I think one of the things is that how do you get other people to get involved? How do you get maybe employees in your company? So a lot of these guys here, they might have some good aspirations about how they can do things in their company, and we'll talk about maybe how existing technology could be turned to be better. But how do they actually take other people, maybe their customers, for example, or their partners or their community on that journey to be convinced of the mission that you think is good? I'm going to come to Tessa first on that.
Thanks, that's a tricky one. Behaviour change, how do you make it happen? It's really hard, actually, to take people with you on that journey, but I actually think it's got a lot easier in the past 12 to 18 months. So something has happened. I think the pandemic played a really significant role. There has been a step change in people's mentality and openness and willingness to engage with the climate crisis, the biodiversity crisis, the resource depletion crisis, the inequality crisis, all these sort of multiple crises that all feed into each other. I sense that we are collectively waking up to these, and each and every one of us is thinking, how can I play a part? And so what we've all now got to do as business leaders is make it really easy for people to take that first step. And you have to position it as a baby step, not a massive, enormous commitment, but just something really small, really simple that you can do starting today or tomorrow. And then once people get on that journey, they get that feedback loop of realizing how great this feels, it then becomes a virtuous cycle. And one thing, it would be remiss of me to miss this opportunity for a shameless plug on this, but I was recently invited to join the government task force for Tech Zero, and that was kind of set up by, being led by Hayden Wood from Bulb, and essentially we are inviting tech businesses to join us and to make a pledge and a commitment to measure their carbon emissions and then to set an ambitious target. Please do Google Tech Zero, and you can find out a bit more information about the pledge there. Most importantly, though, there's a toolkit which helps you sort of take those first steps on this journey. And then the final point I would make when you're trying to go on a journey, either with customers or with employees or partners, is to be really, really honest and transparent about the fact that you are not perfect. This is going to be a journey. It's going to be a long journey. And if you take people along on that journey with you, then you will hopefully avoid the biggest pitfall of all, which is greenwashing, which needs to be avoided at all costs.
You want to define greenwashing for those?
Greenwashing is taking some small little initiative, and actually it's greenwashing, it could be social equality washing, all of these things. It's like taking some small little initiative in some tiny part of your organisation and blowing it up front and centre PR-wise and using the sort of halo of goodness to imply that you're a wonderful organisation. And I just think that really, people are getting very cynical to that, and they're increasingly getting bombarded by these sort of I'm great messages, and people react far better to honesty, which is we're making progress, we've got these really big problem areas, but we're determined to fix them.
Okay, that's great. I think also your employees, we've got a lot of young employees in Naked One, they hold you to account. You just can't work your way around that kind of stuff. They ask you those difficult questions all the time.
And I think that's a really valid point. If you don't start taking action, you will not be able to attract and retain talent.
Yeah.
Simple.
That's a big one for all of us out there, right? Our employees are looking for reasons, remote working. No, I don't want to work in an office now, I want to work remote. Whether the company's looking at sustainability, whether they've got a green agenda, all of that stuff plays into that. Chris?
I was going to say, could I grab the mic? Because I really like what you said about that sort of small incremental changes or opportunities for people to get involved. I think we've all gone through, as you say, sort of like the last 18 months, this societal self-actualization aspiration. Like we're all seeing work as something, not all, but there's a lot of like recognition, like we're not part of a machine anymore. The sort of Taylorist 100 years, like I'm a unit of like production. So I think it's that that's what gives me a lot of confidence in like the change that might come. I think like people are starting to wake up that what is my role in the business? They're getting an agency, a voice when you talk about employees. So for me, it's about setting those feedback loops, those cycles of being able to listen to what your employees are saying, getting your customers involved, and all about community building. You mentioned it. It's about, it is one community for the fantastic organisations alongside here. You listening to that community and getting that feedback and incorporating that into what you're doing. And employees then feel empowered. They feel empowered to make the change. You give them that freedom and that space, and they'll take it and grab it. So, I'd really echo a lot of the points I think that Tessa made there.
And I think the other thing is that often our employees these days, we're looking for much more diversity, and that reflects our consumers or our community stakeholders a lot. And so we can listen to what our employees are guiding us to a little bit, because that will be representative of the community at large. Elliot, what about you in this area? What's your thoughts?
Really interesting on the kind of the baby steps thing, and it totally is that. And it's also has a great definition of greenwashing. I write that down. It's to allow businesses to change course, and to support those businesses that haven't historically been there, that haven't necessarily been like the world's most ethical, but to support those that are trying to make the changes as well. So it is a fine line with greenwashing. It's really interesting. I think, but when it comes to behavior change, I think when it comes to doing good, it is, kind of subtly addictive. So those baby steps are really important. For example, we have subscribers who offset their own carbon footprint as an individual, and then they chat to their business about, maybe there's something here, and that it kind of is like a little pinball mechanism, and it starts to happen, and then the business realize, oh, hey, if we did more good, then there's kind of like another little angle we can tune into with gamification. What used to be thought of as like dark UX or dark arts, where you get people to normally spend more money. This is like a win-win thing that we get to gain here, that kind of a race to the top of our leaderboards for businesses that are trying to change as fast as possible and undoing loads of history. So we really love that kind of kind of gamification thing, like what can make you feel better and better about what you're doing. And no company CEO or someone who's managing a P&L wants to spend a lot of money on something good, but then only to have like a PDF to show for it at the end of it. They need to be able to point to where they've spent the 10 grand or £1 million or whatever on the internet. And so we realized this is what companies need. They just need that value exchange. And so we did quite a lot with kind of having a public impact profile for a business. So it's a place on the internet you get to kind of round up the kind of the good things that are happening, but through honesty and making sure the old greenwash doesn't turn up. But that's not our stick. Any business should have the opportunity to be relevant in the world that we're moving into. If your business isn't already thinking about it, you just it needs to be at core of what you're going to be doing, because soon there's going to be not many businesses that are able to thrive in this kind of climate era that we're coming into.
I mean, that sounds great. I can now see all these CEOs doing the whole "my forest is bigger than your forest" gamification thing, right? And that might be greenwashing a little bit, right? But if it gets the numbers up and gets people engaged,
it's a win-win thing.
It's a great tool. I like the idea that you're gamifying a social enterprise. I mean, that's just plays into the whole endorphins world and getting everybody going. So that's good. Alex, what about you in this space?
Yeah, so I guess how you get people to follow you, that's really the question, isn't it? I mean, you're all leaders, right? I assume everyone in this room has multiple direct reports. And how do you get your direct reports to follow you? And my guess is that you want your direct reports to feel good about following you and to feel good in general. And the sort of leader and manager who dresses people down and makes their direct reports feel shitty and guilty and inadequate is probably not going to be managing that person for too long, because that person will be off or will underperform. And I think that's just the approach that a business needs to take. You need to accept the fact that we can all sit around and we can make people feel shit about themselves and what they're doing, but that's not a very good way of getting them to follow you. And I think one of the big differences between Beam and other organizations who are working in homelessness is that we are about positivity. Our name is Beam because of the connotations of beam and beaming a smile and light and all of these positive things, which is not to say that it's not a sad and tragic situation that there are 330,000 homeless people in the UK, 120,000 homeless children living in emergency accommodation. Of course, that's terrible. Of course, we want to fix that. But making people feel bad and guilty is, I don't think, the way to fix that. And so, I think that economic ecology is a great example of that. It's like, yes, we don't want people to buy as much, but people are going to buy stuff. And telling people to not buy stuff is not a very good way to get people on side. But if people are going to buy stuff, then let's make sure that we can put in all of the incentives and all of the user experience and all the other things to make sure that that's having as positive an impact as possible. So that's the kind of user experience that we also try and create at Beam. Helping people should be joyful. Okay? It should be joyful because it's an inherently joyful thing. I'd argue it's one of the most joyful things that any of us in this room can do. But it doesn't always feel like that. So we needed to create a joyful user experience, and that is hopefully what we're building. And the way it works is people, whether they are businesses or individuals using the Beam platform, they'll get an email each month introducing them to the person that they're helping, sharing the story of the person they're helping, and they will see this individual progress. And it will feel joyful because it is joyful to do very, very little and to see someone's life changing in front of your eyes. And people give all kinds of sums each month. Lots of people just give £5 or a tenner. But I guarantee you that that £5 brings more joy into their life than a pint. I absolutely guarantee you. And so that's the way I think that we create change. It's through joy. It's through making people feel good. We do absolutely no marketing, and we've done now about 80,000 donations through the platform. And it's just word of mouth. People tell their friends, and also people don't churn because it feels good. All of our churn is to do with people changing debit card and credit card. It's almost never because people want to end their monthly subscription. So I think that's how we at least try to do it. It's through joy and positivity.
I think that's good. I think you make a really valid point about how you inspire your team. Yeah, and I think some of the stuff that we as leaders can take away from this panel is that they've got important missions which don't always necessarily have a profit line behind them, and so you can't point at the money and say, oh, we're making lots of money. So you have to find a way of getting people on that mission. And I think the giving money thing and making a difference in somebody's life in a helpful way, I mean, that's like helping an old lady across the street, right? It makes you feel good every time you do it. Yeah. Talking about that, Chris, let's come over to you for our next question. Old ladies. not old ladies. No, that wasn't the link. Sorry, I'll redo that link for you.
Yeah. I'm wondering where this is going to go now.
Profit. So it's not a dirty word. Lots of people in this room will be making money for their companies, right? And we don't want to feel bad about that, yeah? But we can have purpose at the same time as having profit. How do you balance those two things out?
What an interesting question. I've been sat in panels and I've faced this question a few times. And I just think the organisations of the future are those that entwine both. I just see a future where profit and purpose there isn't that choice. And we talked before about like what employees demand, what consumers demand. And yes, there are micro choices around where you spend your time and where you spend your money. But I think this awakening of like, what do we want to do with our lives and where do we want to spend our time? We want to do stuff that has good, but making money is not bad. Making money is a way of growing that, scaling that impact. So prior to joining Sanctus, I built a business in the insurance world, and you go, okay, we used a huge amount of tech and something like. But I firmly believe that we needed to build a business in the right way, and building the business in the right way was empowering customers, giving back to them. It was right, all the B Corp movement was like we were one of the first financial services businesses to to become B Corp. And for me, it just enshrined like what I think business is about now. Business, recognizing our role in society, where we're going back to where we come together as people to work on projects, to do stuff together, and ensure that we're not damaging, we're not leaving a legacy of pain behind us. So, yeah, I'm passionate about, shareholder revolt and not that primary of just trying to make money. It's just, I think it's a dead topic for me. The profit and purpose, they sit closely together, and can act as agents to support each other as you build businesses. So
I think you make a good argument. I'll strike it off my questions for the next panel, right? Yeah, go on, Tessa.
So I also get this question a lot on the panels, and I think about this via analogy, which is that 20 years ago, if we were sat in this room, people would be asking us, how do you balance treating your staff well and having a big successful business? No one is having that conversation today, right? We've all moved on. We've all figured out that treating your staff well and having a big successful business, the two are inextricably linked. Yeah. You can't do one without the other. Like you, Chris, I completely believe profit with purpose is going to be the new business paradigm. And if you kind of don't get with the program, your business will lose the license to exist. I don't know whether it's going to lose the license to exist within 5 years or 15, but it's going to be sometime within that time frame.
Yeah, for sure. I totally agree. Naked Wines is a commercial company. We make profit. We sell wine. It's not really essential. I know a lot of you think it is. But we do it in a way where we've got a virtuous circle going on with the winemakers, the growers, all of the people who help produce the wine, and we sort of pay that back around, and everybody makes profit, and everybody feels like they're helping each other out, right? So I think the two can coexist. Elliot?
It's what you folks just said, but I think for us as ecology, like there's even, let's say you're running a tech company, like an insurance company or whatever, purpose needs to be baked into it. But when your company is literally funding climate action, you have to take kind of purposefulness over profit on on another level. It's quite scary because, if you were to, give me £1 and say put it in climate action, there's a lot of expectations there that you have done truly the right thing. Otherwise, you're going to be real peeved to find out that anything kind of faltering off that line. You have to really know where that money's going, see it. The expectations of the margins are, just for as an example, like a lot of UK charities, their profit margins, net. So the amount of money that they take per donation to run their own operation could be about 40% on average. But for expectations of funding climate action, you've got to be like, well, you're kidding me, taking a couple of percent. So we're on the consumer side, it's around 15% is the right level, and businesses, there's a little bit more leeway, thank you. So it's about 22-ish%. So there's a real high expectation, but it's a real risk, and it's like everyone's cynical, just like I would be when I'm funding climate action. So we're trying to turn it on its head a little by, for example, we just have this kind of an open door CEO day where you can just drop in and ask me that any question you've ever thought of about, like I saw this article about the trees all burning. I just need to hear good things about it to kind of bring me back up, or let's talk about the warts and all. So, we need to ultimately one day be mostly owned by our own community. We just need to move the needle as close as to being a benevolent kind of charity-like company. But being a charity wouldn't get us to where we need to anytime soon. If you think of like Deliveroo, Airbnb, Spotify, they just turned up one year and they became household names. That's what the climate needs. And so that's why we are venture backed and, strictly speaking, a for-profit, because one thing we don't have with the climate is time. So profit is a major part of what we need to do to get there as fast as darn possible, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's move on a little bit. If you can pass the mic to Alex. So hopefully you guys have been inspired, and you're all going to run back to your companies and find ways of doing some good. But maybe you can do some good with your existing tech, or not necessarily tech, but existing resources. So What are your guys' advice on what these guys could do? I think we've heard about some baby steps, and that's good. But what advice could you give these guys on when they hit their desk 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock, they've had a drink? You know, how do they get started on changing, doing something for good for their community, for their businesses? What's your thoughts on that, Alex?
Sure. Well, CSR has been around decades, but I feel that it hasn't really changed that much. I remember I was first exposed to CSR in my first job out of university. I was working for a big law firm, and very little has changed since then, I would say. And for the most part, there's a lot of good intention, but there's not necessarily that much impact. And the problem with there not being that much impact, and I'm talking about the average company, and clearly there are many, many exceptions to this, is that people see through that. And especially, as we were talking about before, sort of Gen Zers see through that as well. And this is a company of 800 people, and you're telling me that that's what we did last year. You know, and they're not necessarily, again, generalizing, over the moon with what the average company is doing. So I guess what would be my advice? You need to drop anything that is tokenistic, because people will see through that in a flash. I remember a couple of years ago, a massive multi-billion-dollar revenue business got in touch and said, could our board come in and paint your office? I said, well, I'm not sure WeWork would love that. But that's like one of the many reasons why that's a terrible idea. You know, the main reason is that it's totally tokenistic and everyone will see through that in a flash. So do stuff that is authentic. Do stuff that you can measure, because as you all know from your own businesses, if you can't measure it, then you can't manage it, you can't increase it. So pick some targets, pick some metrics, be ruthlessly focused on those. Another thing I would say is play to your strengths. And you all have expertise, but you know, use those expertise and be focused and deliberate about it. You know, if you're an amazing, if you've got an amazing engineering team, then offer to do something meaningful with that engineering team. And I would argue that it's what you do as a business that matters the most, your overall impact as a business, not what you do per person within that business. So I think what I mean by that is that I think there's a very, very established CSR tradition where you give everyone half a day a year or 1 or 2 days a year. And, that's just not helpful. That's just not helpful. And most of the time charities accept that help is because they hope that it is part of a breadcrumb trail to a big donation. But ask yourselves, would you want someone joining your team for 1 day? No way. But if you were to actually take a small group and actually give them a meaningful chunk of time, a little secondment, maybe it's a few months, maybe it's just weeks, but a block of time, then they'll be able to do some amazing things with those partner organizations, and the whole company will feed off of their success.
And I think that plays to what Tessa was talking about earlier on, about retaining your talent, yeah? First of all, investing in them, that you're willing for them to go off and do something else for, maybe a couple of weeks, a month, half a year or whatever, is really great. And then they'll bring all of that goodness and good process and learning back into your organisation. I mean, it's a win-win situation in that sense, yeah. Elliot, what about you?
Speaking to some of you folks earlier, and it's like some of these businesses that you're involved with are massive, and talking personally with Ecology, we had a lot of individuals and families and SMEs involved, and in the last few months, like mostly just enterprises, and kind of like the opportunity you have as a sizable company is just. It's just staggering. So, like, you have a real opportunity to be a real kind of climate leader, especially in your kind of senior positions that you have. So, yeah, if you can make it happen, start to raise the flag. Think of how you can bake climate and sustainability and restoration of the things that you find important. Then as a techie, you'll see the opportunities abound with integrations and seeing the impact that you can have, and make your bosses real happy by knowing the kind of the additional revenue that you'll be getting from all the kind of being able to persist in the future of being like a purposeful kind of greenish company, it's a real big deal. Like in the next, over the next few weeks, essentially, we're mostly getting involved with this kind of real-time automated carbon footprinting of enterprise businesses. It's really exciting. So if you're interested about measuring your actual carbon footprints, come chat to me a little bit later. But it's, seeing is believing. When you can actually see your carbon footprint, you can check on it like an hour later and it'd be different. It's really bizarre seeing emissions happen within your business just in front of your eyes, and it's going to make a real big difference for sure.
Tessa, in terms of, you pivoted a little bit, or not pivoted, but added an additional service around the school meals, right? Mm-hmm. And I think you said, and I'm a technologist, so I'm always wary of this, I think you said really quickly, like almost overnight, we spun up something to do that. But technologists, they'll be very nervous about it and stuff like that. But, can we do stuff quickly? I mean, we've got some big companies here, as Elliot says, and sometimes they can be a bit slow to turn, like a tanker. But is it simpler than that? Is it just doing quick things and getting new capability out to the marketplace? What do you think?
Before you start trying to do something, for me, the very, very first step is to get some fire in your belly. You will only take action if you give a shit. And I highly recommend, if you want to get some fire in your belly, either reading 2 books, which is Naomi Klein's book, Capitalism versus the Climate, and Paul Gilding's book, The Great Disruption. Or if you're more of a kind of video documentary type person, Al Gore's classic An Inconvenient Truth, Leonardo DiCaprio's Before the Flood. Once you've watched and read those things, you will have serious fire in your belly. Once you have fire in your belly, you will start to make things happen. The next thing, before you start taking any actions, is to make sustainability, and I use that as the kind of the broad umbrella term for, I think, something that all of us are addressing, is you have to make sustainability a top 3 priority for your organisation. Not a top 10, not a top 5, a top 3. Because this is an emergency, it is a crisis, and stuff will only get done if it's a top 3. And you need to be talking to your C-suite and getting collective buy-in to this being a top 3 priority. Then you need to look at your company values and check that your company values are consistent with this being a top 3 priority. Then you need to look at your KPIs and check that they are also reinforcing this being a top 3 priority. So you've got to do all of that homework first before you then start taking action. And then I would say with the action, what I said before, start small. It is amazing. The other thing you'll have to do is empower your people, by the way. We have not got the time for a command and control approach to solving these crises. The leaders have to say this is a top 3 priority, here's our company values, here's our KPIs, and then you have to empower your people to start coming up with great creative solutions. And many of them will come up with hugely impactful quick wins very fast. And there'll be some longer term projects as well.
I think that will resonate with our audience hugely. As technologists, somebody in our business teams are always turning up and asking us just to deliver something overnight. Mm-hmm. And we often say, can you just think about that a little bit? Can you just put a business case around it? Can you actually think what it means? And so I think you just quite rightly said, whoa, stop, don't build, don't do something, think about it and get that. So I think that will resonate a lot.
Can I do one shameless plug as well? Go for it. Which is, sorry, it'd be rude not to. No, I am sure that many of you have large corporate canteens or you run catered events, and at those you will inevitably have an enormous amount of perfectly good food being thrown in the bin every single day. If that is the case, please reach out to me and Olio. We have 30,000 trained volunteers who collect and redistribute unsold and unserved food from large organisations such as Tesco, Pret a Manger, Compass Catering, Elior, Selfridges, Planet Organic, you name it. So if you want to reach net zero, you are going to have to stop throwing away food, and we can help you do that.
Great. Excellent. Thank you. They haven't left yet, Chris. They're still here. So they want to make some change. They want to do something. Is it as hard as Tess is saying, or is it easier than that?
I'm not sure how to follow that. That's exactly. The systemic change you're talking about requires all of that, doesn't it? It requires from the top all the way through to the enablement of your employees to be able to take action. So, you need to be you need to put all of that in place. It's easy for me with a small business. You need to role model it as a leader, create that space. And then to your point, like pick a cause that you care about as a team. Listen to your employees and go, right, let's pick a cause, let's put it on the agenda, and then let's put the resources behind it, and then lead by example. Like, you've got to get involved. You can't just outsource it and get. I'm sure you're in large organisations where you think we set up this committee and okay, I'll go off and do it. You've got to get involved yourself. So I think it's the systemic change. You've got to get it started. And for me, shameless plug as well. I think from a mental health perspective, like, you've got to slow down. I'm telling everyone at the moment that we seem to have got this expectation we're moving from an 18-month period of hibernation straight into hunting. You don't see the bears in the wild go straight from, right, they've been asleep for 9 months and they're straight out in the river hunting fishes. It takes them time. And there's this expectation suddenly within the commercial world that, right, we can now start growing again. Right, let's start motoring. Your employees are suffering at the moment, and they're going to be struggling. So slow down, listen to them, and if you need some help with that, give me a call and we'll see if we can come and help you.
That's really great advice. I'm sure a lot of you... we've got a question. We've got lots of questions. Well, that is the end of the official question, so it seems a good time to open up to the floor. Do you want to try shouting out? I'm going to go right to the back first, because that's where the first question was. Oh, there we go.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this. I think particularly the revenue question was really interesting for me, because in Tech for Good, right, it's one of the only places inside of capitalism where your revenue is probably the closest mental proxy that we have for human health. And I'm really interested in the idea of what it looks like for each of you if you've wildly succeeded within the next 5 years. What does our world look like?
Oh, that's a great question. Go on, Tessa. You wanna give that a go?
I do. I've just been pitching for our Series B, so I've got this one. So we have set ourselves an enormous target at Olio, which is we want 1 billion Olioers by 2030. And the reason for that is really, really simple. We cannot continue to puzzle over how we're going to keep the world to within 1.5 degrees warmed, and how we're going to feed 10 billion people while simultaneously throwing away 1/3 of all the food we produce and consuming as if we have 1.75 planets. So the current trajectory that humanity is on, our economics is on, our economy is on, our society, our culture, whether we like it or not, we're all in mass denial right now, is not sustainable. Endless GDP growth, it is fairy tales, as Greta Thunberg was saying. So we're about to go through this sort of massive period of disruption, which is hugely exciting. I say to everyone that kind of the sustainability revolution is going to make the digital revolution look like a walk in the park, quite frankly. So we all better kind of get ready for that. For Olio specifically, what we want to do is completely reinvent consumption. So at the moment, we extract resources from the planet, use them for 5% of the useful life, toss them into landfill, 7.5 billion people doing that, rinse, wash and repeat. We can't carry on. And we want people, when they consume, for their default to be, well, what already exists in my local community that I can take for free, what my neighbours don't want. I can borrow what my neighbours are not using. And then when I do buy something brand new, I will buy something made locally with love. And so we have a vision of the world which is circular, it's got community, it's got people right at the heart of it, and we need technology to enable that and to connect us all up.
You have been practicing. That was really good. Elliot, you had some stats earlier about where you were hoping to be in a couple of years' time and the percentage of carbon footprint that you'll have reversed. Talk to us about that a bit. Where is that?
Yes, so the numbers are starting to stack up, and it's really exciting because this isn't just this isn't just like 1 million trees here or some great action, or even just 100 trees there. It's starting to stack up. We're funding all sorts of projects, but so at the end of the year, it'll be a couple of % of the UK carbon footprint, which is mind-boggling. But it's interesting about kind of like where can this go? We internally we got eyes on becoming the Spotify of sustainability. It works for us on a lot of reasons. It's really nice. It's kind of slightly easier to have a Spotify or a Netflix subscription versus not, and so that kind of you have it because it's easier sort of thing. So big fans of it. But Spotify or Netflix, 150 million subscribers. If you use that if we had 150 million subscribers, on paper it'd be 17-ish% of the world's emissions reduced or avoided. The economics would get wobbly at the end of the spectrum, but it's a very good problem to have. So, there's an unbelievable opportunity that we as everyday people can have to solve the climate change thing that we're dealing with. So yeah, we're pretty excited, but we're in a weird position where we can see on our own spreadsheets of what happens in the future. The hard part is just showing everyone else in to say that this is a viable path we've got here.
But that opportunity must drive you, right? It must, each time you look at the spreadsheet again and go, if we do that, we can do this,
Yeah, it's cool. I mean, just speaking to a tree planting partner of ours, and they're moving to plant, they're doing 10 million trees planted every day, and they're moving to be like 1 billion a day. It's just it's mind-boggling. There's a lot of bad happening and accelerating, but there's a lot of good also. Yeah, it's cool.
Okay, that was great. I'm going to go to another question in the middle there, my colleague. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Flavina from Gang, and Alex, good to see you again. You're on my podcast. If you don't know me, I'm the founder of Recall as well, creative branding and marketing discipline. I also run a podcast called Tech-Based Entrepreneurs as a discipline advisor, and we talk about changes. And as you can see in this room, there's not a lot of black women. It's only two. Me and the lazy, beautiful lady in green in front of me. And one of my social purpose was to increase diversity. Because if you think about it, how can we really develop technology product that really don't represent all of us? So I had a crazy idea of launching a book called Voices in the Shadow, which will be coming out for Black History Month this month. So I'm still looking for sponsors, just so you know. But my question, you mentioned that one of your 3 top elements are sustainability, and what about diversity and inclusion, which is basically one of the things that is actually very important to me. As you can see, I want to see more representation, just not on stage, but also in the room.
Yeah, I mean,
Can I
go
talk?
for it.
Yeah.
We could do a whole seminar on ED&I, so yeah, but go for it.
I feel so passionate about this area. The only reason why we are in this shit show that we're in right now is because we have not had diverse voices in positions of power. If you do the 5 whys, which I can remember I was on a run one day and I was like, why are we in this ridiculous situation? Why is the climate crisis even happening? And I realised it's because we do not have diverse voices in position of power. And I think that solving the climate crisis and all these crises that we're talking about are inextricably linked with diversity, inclusion, and equality. So I, wholeheartedly agree with what you say. I don't necessarily have all the solutions, but I think it is really, really important to acknowledge that we're not going to solve one problem without solving the other as well.
Alex, how does that affect the communities that you work with? I mean, you presumably come across a great range of diversity. Does that tune how your mission works, or?
Yeah, I mean, I see Beam as directly addressing social and racial justice issues, for sure. About 65% of the people using the service are black or minority ethnic. A lot of the social problems that we're working on disproportionately affect those communities. And of course, we try and build a team that has a similar diversity within it. And I would mark us sort of 6, 7 out of 10. We're doing okay, but there's a lot more we can do on that front. But yeah, I don't know, Flaville, if that answers your question, because you probably bored by me for an hour already talking the other day. But yeah, I mean, I totally agree with Tessa. You have to have a variety of perspectives within your organisation, because people who've led similar lives unbelievably think similar things. And if you have, for me, a lack of contrarianism is, at a high level, one of the biggest problems in the world. And I think it leads to a lack of innovation, a lack of creativity. And so, the shortcut to contrarianism is, I think, diversity of perspectives, and that only comes from diversity of people.
Great. We've got time for one more question. Anybody got a question? Hi.
Hello. Oh, I'm going to try and... Hi. Well, I'm a founder of a Tech for Good company, much earlier than everyone here, so big admiration. I love the kind of messages that all of you said about inspiring bigger companies and technology companies in this case to do more, because they have all that power. They have an immense amount of people sitting in their offices or in their houses for connected through those networks, and they have influence on what they do for society and the environment. But I come from a big tech company, and I know that it's going to be ages before they have sustainability in the top 3 priorities. So how actually we make a difference? Maybe not me, no, I'm not there, but employees, how can they actually make a difference in the way the leadership thinks? Because being inside at that point 3 years ago, I didn't feel I had a chance, and it wasn't because I couldn't talk to them, it was because I could talk to them and I knew it was going through one ear, smile out the other ear, and nothing was going to happen. So in your positions, and a lot of you having kind of influence on leaderships in big companies as well through what you do, like how do you see that happening for other businesses that are not doing as much? Like what's the main key element that makes them perform?
I'm going to let the guys think who wants to take that one, but I'm a leader as well. I have a really simple answer to that, and it touches on what Tessa was talking about. We have to listen. Right? We have to listen to our employees, we have to listen to our customers, because it almost doesn't matter what you believe. I'm of a certain age and a certain colour and a certain background. I'm not going to tune in to a lot of that kind of stuff. But if I don't listen, then I won't have a company and I won't have employees and I won't be able to do anything. So it's relying on the voice of the people, the voice of your staff, the voice of your customers to come through and listen to that. That would be my simplistic. It's a little simplistic, but...
I mean, I think we need to be really realistic that massive tech companies are always going to care a huge amount about making massive revenue and massive profit. That's the reality, right? So it's how do we work with that reality? Well, I think we need leadership of these businesses to understand that if they can adopt a model of what you might call stakeholder capitalism, is usually the term used, then they will actually be bigger and more robust businesses. I think Satya Nadella at Microsoft has been a good example of this. If you can think about the impact you're having on your communities, on your suppliers, on your employees, and many other stakeholders, then you can keep your best people, and you will not have regulators breathing down your throat, and you will not have, shareholder revolts and all these other things. So there is enlightened self-interest in adopting a model of stakeholder capitalism. How do you do that? Well, very quickly, you have to map out your stakeholders, you have to map out the principles, and you have to measure yourself against how you deliver on certain KPIs for all of those stakeholders. That's basically kind of, I would say, how it works. So yeah, I think you just need to play with the forces of capitalism. But ultimately, the biggest thing that will create this change, if the leaders do not have the initiative to change themselves, will be people leaving. And every week we're getting applications from people at Google and Facebook and McKinsey and Microsoft and all of these places, and they're happy to leave wonderful perks and free lunches and big salaries and all the rest because they're unsure that their organization is on the right path. Now, at some point, that noise will become a stampede to the exit if the leaders of these businesses don't do more. But I personally think they will do more because they're very smart people and they will do the right thing. Much as we would love to have lots more job applications, I would also prefer the leaders of these massive world-changing businesses do the right thing.
Such an interesting question, and analogy of like a personal experience here is there's kind of these micro changes, they start to add up, and it's all about your voice that you have, and you think that it's just your voice alone, but my own experience is it's only about 3 years ago that I had some friends come over and they'd switched to vegan, and I was like, oh man, that was like a brunch. I was like, what even is a vegan brunch? And I was annoyed, and I couldn't think of it, like can't even have a croissant or whatever, and then in that time so much has happened, especially like in Bristol. I don't know how London is these days. I'm a Londoner, but I've been out of the scene for a little while. But these changes stack up. Those weirdo vegans is now like perfectly acceptable and soon to be absolutely required in the future to happen. So your voice is just so important. Just make sure it's out there, and that change will happen.
Yeah, I would definitely echo that with the kind of analogy. So I spend a lot of time thinking, how can individuals possibly make a difference? Because it's so easy to be incredibly depressed. You look at governments, they're doing the square root of fuck all. You look at large organisations, they're doing even less. It's terrible. No one's doing anything. And then you think, what can I do? Just little old me. And my message to everybody is that you are incredibly, incredibly powerful. So just on the climate crisis piece, 60% of all greenhouse gas emissions are directly related to household consumption. That's you, that's me, that's us, right? 60% of this problem is us. And so how you make change happen is you move your money. Every time you spend £1, it's a vote. You either vote for the status quo, you give it to these big, lazy incumbent companies who don't care, or you move your money and give it to a business that's building the future that you want. And that data, even if it's only 10,000 people or 100,000 people, that data quickly goes up there. And they notice those sales figures. They notice a 0.5% change in something. And that is how change starts happening. And then in the workplace, it's exactly the same, what both of these guys have said. You think, how can I send data? The most powerful way you can send data is quit. And there are thousands and thousands of people who are busy doing that. Some people, but that is a position of privilege to be able to do that. We need to recognise that, right? Not everyone can do that. If you can, you should. But if you can't, just by talking about it fairly relentlessly and raising that this is an important point, you are sending data back up to the system, and that is what will drive change. Businesses and governments will not change until we start holding them to account.
Excellent, excellent. Any last thoughts, Chris?
I mean, I'd echo all the points. I think I was going to respond and say move with your feet. I mean, it is a privilege, but the last places where the ripple of what's happening isn't hitting is the investor community. I feel like we've got people on stage here who are raising money, and hopefully raising money from well-intentioned investors. But from an investment standpoint, they want to make returns, and they want to make as much returns as possible. So, unless we move with our feet, unless we move our cash, unless we take our individual actions so that it ripples up to, yes, absolutely, the founders of business and the CEOs of business, but they've got shareholders that sit behind them, and they've got investors that sit behind those businesses. And they've got to see that it isn't just about the money. I think, it's back to one of my earlier points. We've all got agency, and I think we've got to recognise where we can use that through the data and move with our money and move with our feet.
Great. Hopefully that answered your question. I think that we've got technologists in the room here. They're all highly, highly paid. That is privileged, but they can move with their feet if they want to, right? They can absolutely do that. So this seminar's been about tech for good. You guys are tech. You can hopefully have been inspired to go and do something good. Can we have a round of applause for our panelists, please?